European Union officials are preparing to bring social media influencers directly into the political center of Brussels, a move that may sound symbolic at first, but reflects a deeper shift in how governments across the world are trying to control attention, shape narratives, and compete for public trust online. Under a pilot program expected to begin in July, influencers could be granted access to EU leaders' summits and ministerial meetings inside the Council of the European Union. The proposal immediately triggered skepticism among diplomats and officials, not because the idea was technically difficult, but because it exposed a larger question confronting democratic institutions: whether traditional political communication still works in an information environment increasingly dominated by short-form video platforms, algorithm-driven visibility, and online personalities with audiences larger than many newspapers. According to multiple diplomats and officials familiar with the discussions, the Council of the EU proposed allowing selected influencers to enter spaces inside its Brussels headquarters that are normally reserved for accredited journalists. The creators would reportedly be allowed inside press areas and so-called doorstep zones where ministers and leaders arrive before meetings. However, unlike professional reporters, they would not be permitted to ask questions. Council staff would accompany them throughout the events, and the number of invited creators would reportedly be capped at around 10 per summit or ministerial gathering. The Council later confirmed the initiative, explaining that the objective is to engage new audiences and increase awareness of Council activities. In practical terms, Brussels is trying to adapt to a media ecosystem where younger Europeans increasingly consume political information through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, and creator-led commentary rather than television broadcasts or newspaper coverage. The reaction inside EU institutions was mixed almost immediately. Several diplomats described the response during last week's working party on information as cautious or lukewarm. Some officials questioned whether social media personalities without policy expertise could meaningfully explain highly technical negotiations involving trade, migration, sanctions, energy policy, defense coordination, or fiscal rules. One diplomat reportedly compared the atmosphere in the room to a generational disconnect, where senior officials believed they were introducing a highly innovative communication strategy, while others responded with doubts about its actual value. Still, the proposal did not emerge in isolation. European institutions have already been moving steadily toward influencer engagement over the past several years. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has repeatedly participated in interviews and discussions with online creators, particularly during major EU communication campaigns. Influencers were also invited to her State of the Union address, and the Commission distributed so-called influencer kits as part of recent outreach efforts. These efforts reflect a growing institutional belief that formal press conferences and traditional media appearances are no longer enough to shape public perception, especially among younger demographics. The shift is also happening in a broader political environment where online influence increasingly translates into real political power. One of the clearest examples is Phidias Panayotou, the Cypriot content creator who won a seat in the European Parliament during the 2024 elections after building a massive online following. Across Europe, politicians on both the right and left have adapted aggressively to social media campaigning. Figures such as Jordan Bardella in France have accumulated millions of followers by using platforms like TikTok to bypass traditional media structures entirely. That trend matters because political communication inside Europe has changed dramatically over the past decade. During earlier eras, public opinion was shaped largely through television interviews, newspapers, and party-controlled messaging. Today, algorithms reward emotionally engaging, simplified, and visually fast content. European institutions, often criticized for being bureaucratic, distant and difficult to understand, now face pressure to compete in an attention economy dominated by speed and personality. The Council's proposal therefore reflects more than a communications experiment. It reveals concern inside European institutions that anti-establishment movements and populist figures have adapted faster to digital media than mainstream governing bodies. The fear among some policymakers is not simply losing online engagement metrics. It is losing narrative control over major issues, including migration, economic policy, defense spending, climate regulation, and the future direction of the European Union itself. At the same time, the initiative has raised concerns from traditional journalists and media organizations. The International Press Association, representing reporters who cover EU institutions, criticized the plan by arguing that influencers are not bound by the same disclosure rules and professional ethics expected of accredited journalists. Professional correspondents operating inside EU institutions are generally expected to follow standards regarding transparency, conflicts of interest, sourcing, and editorial independence. Critics argue that creators operating through sponsorships, platform monetization, or political partnerships may not face equivalent scrutiny. That tension reflects a larger global debate over who now functions as media. Influencers increasingly break news, shape political narratives, and build highly loyal audiences without operating through traditional editorial systems. Governments, meanwhile, see creators as potentially useful because they can reach younger audiences more effectively than institutional messaging campaigns. But critics warn that access without accountability could blur the line between political communication, public relations, and journalism. One possible outcome is that the pilot program remains limited and largely symbolic. Influencers may receive controlled access, while institutions continue relying primarily on established press systems for serious political coverage. In that scenario, the initiative functions mostly as a public outreach exercise aimed at improving the EU's image among younger Europeans. A second possibility is more consequential. If EU institutions conclude that creator-driven communication delivers stronger public engagement than traditional press formats, Brussels could gradually expand influencer access across more political events and institutions. That would represent a structural shift in how European politics is communicated to the public. Political messaging would become increasingly personalized, visual, and algorithm-oriented, potentially reducing the influence of traditional political journalism over time. The timing is especially important because the European Union is entering a period of rising political fragmentation, economic pressure, and strategic uncertainty. Questions surrounding migration policy, industrial competitiveness, defense coordination, artificial intelligence regulation, and relations with the United States, China, and Russia are all becoming more politically sensitive. Institutions in Brussels are aware that public legitimacy increasingly depends not only on policy outcomes, but also on whether citizens feel connected to decision-making processes that often appear remote and technocratic. This is why a debate about influencers at EU summits is attracting attention far beyond social media culture itself. It touches on a deeper transformation in democratic communication. Political institutions are adapting to a world where visibility, relatability, and digital reach increasingly shape political influence alongside formal authority. The critical question now is whether institutions can modernize communication without weakening standards around transparency, accountability, and independent scrutiny.